Welcome to SHP Online. I'm Simon Toseland, Compliance Services Director for Salisbury Group. I'm joined by Paul Bussey of Scott Brown Rig and Dan Jourdan of Mapley Estates. We're talking construction design management regulations. We've got a very clear idea now of what the regulations have in store for us, and it certainly looks like April 2015 will be the date when they become law. One of the headline changes, of course, is the removal of the CDM coordinator role and the introduction of a new principal designer function. Paul, how do you see that working? How do principal designers need to change what they're doing at the moment, or should it be a fairly straightforward change?
Well, Simon, morning gentlemen. Sitting here in front of St Paul's Cathedral, it seems pretty clear that we've been doing this for quite a long period of time, and it's an issue which architects have been dealing with, but have been told they're not dealing with it in a suitable manner. I think now we're getting to a stage where there's perhaps a reversion to the use of drawings, the use of a visual understanding of risk, and incorporating that into design projects, rather than producing a large bureaucratic waste of paper, which unfortunately gives an illusion of safety rather than actual safety. So I think it's a role that architects can play, have played, need a bit more confidence to play going forward, but with the assistance of a qualified health and safety practitioner or CDM consultant, as I like to see him, we can take this on with the new regulations and, of course, with the client's assistance.
No, I agree. Having been a CDM coordinator since the conception of the role back in 2007, I actually personally believe that a good CDMC should not only be there to assist and advise the clients, which what the current regulations dictate, but I actually see them that they should be a focal part of the project team. So, for me, absolutely critical they're involved at the design stage. Designers are very good, but I think sometimes it's just a case of making sure that health and safety stays on the radar. And although a majority of health and safety issues do picked up, sometimes important factors do get overlooked. I guess the lights at Heathrow are a classic example. It's obviously somebody somewhere could have asked the question of, well, how are you going to get up there and maintain those? And it's often no fault of any of the designers, but it's just something that an extra pair of eyes can look at and ask the question. But I think even going further than that, having worked with a number of large principal contractors as well, once you've got an understanding of those project-specific risks that have come from identified through the design risk management process or through having a good understanding of the building, is then taking that to the principal contractor and talking through it and coming up with solutions about how that project can then be delivered safely.
Yeah, and from the client side, there are some clients that are more educated than others in terms of the CDM regs and the effect they can have on a project right from its inception through to completion and being in use. Therefore, the CDMC role as it stands at the moment is often very valuable because it adds something to the table right from the start. It's too easy to see of it as just kind of a standalone box-ticking exercise. It's not that. It has to be there right from the start to ensure that everyone around the table is thinking about the health and safety of those on site and the end building users right from the get-go.
Could I add, though, that certainly clients, if they continue down the route of lowest cost selection process, will not get the delivery of service that is asked for in the regulations. And some greater understanding of how the team are put together from a financial and a competence background is essential to run this principal designer and CDM consultant, or whatever he might be called, role going forward. Because lowest cost so far has led to lowest value in CDM terms, which is one of the reasons why CDMCs are not perceived as adding value currently.
Because they haven't been brought in early enough, so they're brought in when things are already fairly advanced, and so people think, well, what you're actually adding now, you should have been here 10 weeks ago, kind of thing.
Yeah, and then they produce a tick box process of just asking people to fill in forms rather than actually getting involved in the issues and helping solve them. They've had an attitude that they're not designers. Actually, if they're not designers, why are they around a design team table? Are they just a policeman, or are they actually contributing to that design process, which is where we see they must be? And the principal designer is going to have to do that, but perhaps with their assistance.
Dan, one of the other key changes, of course, will be the explicit requirement to look at competence from the CDM regs.
Yeah.
How, as a client then, would you make that judgment? What would you look for, not only for the CDMC, but also in the wider project team when you're making those appointments?
It's a big question. It very much depends on the complexity of the project. Generally we're happy to outsource the CDMC role as is on fairly small projects because the involvement is not so complex. But for a large project, we need to see some kind of justification of background experience, years in the role. A designer who spent 7 years studying film design clearly has a lot of understanding about the implications, but do they have the on-site practical application of it? Likewise, from CDMC role, have they spent enough time out on site, or have they just been sitting in an office drawing up method statements, etc.? And I think under the regs at the moment, it's a bit ambiguous about who is to take the responsibility. Do we, the client, make a value judgment every time, or is it going to say that every qualified architect, by implication, is going to become the new principal designer? We need kind of a bit of advice on that.
I would like to respond to that, Simon, from the point of view that the RIBA are very much looking at the training and education and knowledge and experience and skill set of architects, schools of architecture and currently in practice. We're looking at that for being ready, oven ready, as they say, for April 15. And that level and bar has got to be agreed amongst our own institute, with perhaps the HSE, but also with other institutes, such as the Institution of Civil Engineers, who are actively working with us to try and create that. Together with, might I say, the Association for Project Safety, who have a lot of experience in this field and can add benefit. But that bar might not be as high as some people think. It's a level of understanding, but it's about a collaborative process and understanding how the team can get the best out of that project.
Do you think there's enough time? I mean, have RIBA had enough advance notice to ensure that there are modules in current courses, such as those qualifying next year, for example, are going to be...
No, there's no chance at all. It's just the way it is. But there is certainly a 6-month period of transition, which has already been agreed, and almost an informal discussion that HSE and RIBA have had, where they're expecting it to take 2 years to fully embed. Now, that is a matter of fact, and we can then start integrating our training courses. Well, I have been going around lecturing to architects around the country on the potential changes and what it means, so we are introducing that to our members.
They mentioned earlier about the cost. You gave the lowest cost solution. Clearly, I'm going to make points until too late on. But by implication, if the principal designer is going to take on that role, are we going to see an increase in architects' fees across the board? So are people going to then try to screw architects to get their prices down?
Oh, I like the term. I think architects realise, and they did in '94, that this is going to be an additional responsibility from a criminal and a civil point of view, so it will take time, there's got to be resource, and we're not going to do it for free. So clients have got to be aware of that, but it is a coordination exercise at the end of the day, and they will have to call on other experience, which will be another cost. So this coordination is going to have to be seen to be being done, so there will be a level of bureaucracy, but that we're trying to get as much of that on drawings and to embed within the existing process, whether it's in specifications as well, of trade situations such as bricklayers, whatever it might be, and the relevant issues, but there will be a cost. So how we manage that and explain that is for further discussion.
Because I think clients might say, well, I was going to pay extra CDM coordinator, who's a separate entity, I'm already paying you as a designer. If you're going to take on that role, I'm not expecting you to charge me your fee plus X, I want your fee plus a little bit less than X. That's one bit. My concern is that costs are still going to be driven down, but it's going to be driven down on the design side rather than the CDMC side.
You know, and certainly in my experience, and there's not been enough projects as a CDM coordinator when we've been appointed right at the very start, an early stage. But it's those types of projects actually when you get a certain degree of security in terms of project programme and construction budget, and I think that goes hand to hand with good health and safety management. And I think this is where we really need to put more case studies across of exactly what value a good CDM coordinator or a good CDM consultant can add.
So Paul, in terms of kind of the RIBA stages of work, do you think it's right from the strategic definition or from project brief? What point do you think we're going to have to get this on the table for, on the agenda for?
We're currently trying to put a book together within the RIBA to try and explain that process, but very clearly it's becoming out that the concept design, St Paul's Cathedral, goes on the drawings, and we get the dome and we get the cathedral. Now, how we build that and how we manage those risks to build that is another issue, but we're not going to go back from that design concept. And consequently, we know there's some difficult issues building in London, and there might be a river underneath the site or whatever. It's got to be accommodated, But that is a common knowledge. It doesn't need a big CDMC specialist input. It's when we get into the detailed design, we need more input. Now, I think this thing about getting the CDMC in early is fine, but not as early as the concept.
Right.
Is this
So
where
it's a technical design stage or before that?
I think, perhaps like before, if you've reached planning application stage, you need something just before planning application stage that puts things into context, but not right at early inception and concept development.
This is where we need good client involvement, I think, throughout the whole, particularly the design stage of the project, because it's important for you to understand, to say, okay, we're coming up with this solution, but you obviously need to then buy in terms of what it is that you need to manage. On
the concern would be about timelines. I mean, if we've done a planning submission and someone later says, oh, by the way, you've forgotten to include X, we've then got to revise the planning submission, that loses us time on a big critical time to the project. That's key. So for the sake of a small spend on the role, whether it's the CDM coordinator or the new principal design, to make sure it's included earlier, it can actually save you money rather than having to revisit design.
I guess in summary, the spirit of these changes is still there from 2007. It's still about having good coordination, early appointments, and getting the right people.
And that has been very clearly pointed out by Professor Lofted, and the current HSE proposals are that CDM 2007 was not broken, it was just misunderstood, misinterpreted, and caused confusion. So there's a much greater move to make it simpler, more understandable, particularly at the SME, smaller end of the industry. It suited the higher end of the industry, as we're sitting. It sort of suited that end of the industry, but the SMEs are struggling. So now hopefully this will be more in their language and understanding, but for everybody, rather than just this top end.
In terms of SMEs, I mean, so for small architectural outfits, for example, for them it might be quite an additional overhead to start providing or have to go back and retrain. Do you think that's a concern for SMEs on the design side?
I think that this whole approach is meant to be proportionate, practicable, suitable and sufficient, an understanding of what so far is reasonably practicable under the Health and Safety at Work Act 74, as you say, requires, is actually not that onerous. It's about a value judgment made by a team in a project situation. And there might be things that are missed, but you're actually not going to capture everything.
So we look forward now to the new guidance, which is due out January 2015, is the sort of latest understanding, and we wait with bated breath, and hopefully those goals and targets will be met.
Absolutely.